Now we'll talk about what are some actual practical ways that you can go ahead and cut retention costs in the cloud. So what are some actual strategies that you can go ahead and apply? And I think that this is going to be great because there's a lot of ways that you can do it. And I think we'll start with there are a few different kind of buckets of how that strategies can be applied. The first one is around actually classifying your backup data. So rather than, going and say, for lack of a better term, naively kind of applying the same retention policy, the same frequency to every single resource, being able to actually classify the different types of data that you have in your cloud landscape and backup based on the actual business context. So I think like we were discussing before, sometimes that can actually be difficult to do. So for example, customers that might have thousands of different resources, let's take S3 buckets as an example, that are all commingled in the same account. It can be difficult, right, if those resources are not properly tagged or classified in any type of uniform way to actually apply backup policies to them. So this is one of those areas that I think having that type of centralized view enables you to have your backups on AWS, simplify, right, the retention and the retention and frequency or backup schedules of those resources by basically letting a tool like Eon, for example, take those S3 buckets, discover them, and tell you without the need for tags, right, what environment is that resource, what type of data might be contained within that resource. So all of a sudden, you might have thousands of different S3 buckets that can be spread across many, many AWS accounts in an org, and then actually start applying a tier strategy rather than applying the same policy across the org. So you can make sure you're backing up the things that you really need to be backing up, and you're doing so in a way where you're meeting your needs, but not overpaying. So that's one thing I think is really important to look at. What about you, Anthony? Any suggestions from your side?
Yeah. First off, I love your suggestion. I'll take right sides. You're making sure that their retention windows and retention periods are appropriate for the workloads, right? So you kind of take that, taking that classification a step further, right? Now we've classified our backup data. How long should these be retained for, right? So, for example, we see typically with like your dev, test, QA sort of accounts and workloads, typically those stick around for anywhere from like 7 to 30 days. There's typically not a reason to keep them around for much longer. Whereas production could be a year, could be more. And if we're talking compliance data, that could be 5 to 7 to infinity. But really, when I have those conversations with customers, we love to use the term working backwards at AWS a lot. And yeah, it kind of conjures up some weird mental images of a guy like me just walking backwards in a room. That's weird. But really what that's intended to be, it's not that. It's really just to make sure that we've got the requirements kind of really flushed out. And 9 times out of 10, that's where a lot of the work is, right? What are your requirements, right? Because I've seen customers, like I mentioned before, I've seen customers where we don't know our requirements, so we're just going to keep everything forever. And it's like, well, you know what? Nobody's got a limited budget. That's the problem, right? I mean, the budget just isn't there usually to support that. And especially when we start talking about immutable type backups, right? If there's need for immutability, do you really want to have things immutable forever? That's a cost optimization nightmare at that point. So really defining what those retention windows are. So when we start looking at things like Eon with the posture awareness, we can input those business rules in there based on the workload, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great point, and understanding, right, using all the insight that we have or that we've gained right into our environment to actually apply the correct retention policy, really, really important. And I think that brings us to another area that's I think also important. A great concept here when it comes to posture aware, right, backups and automation, and that's automating enforcement of backup policies. So one issue I think that we've seen a lot in talks with our customers is this idea where, especially when there's this type of self-service or per account configuration. So you might have, hundreds of different engineering teams that are working on AWS. Each might have their own account or set of accounts. And, it's great because they have the agility to go and innovate and develop software on AWS. But the other side of that equation can also infinitely spin up resources and then create backup policies however they see fit. And one of the issues with that is you can have a really inconsistent thing where one team, for example, sees, just like you were talking about, for them, prod backups need 3 years, but for another team, prod backups need 45 days. And, the compliance team says we need 8 months. And so you have a situation where you're overpaying and over backing up in some teams and under backing up in others. And one of the really nice things I think about Eon's posture-aware automation approach is this idea of being able to enable self-service backup automation, but still have that automated enforcement, so that governance layer at the organization level. And the way that we achieve that is for our customers that are doing backups, in the cloud on AWS, they're able to actually go ahead and create something that we call backup posture controls. Yeah, I think, Tyler, that's a great point about your backups there. Backup posture controls would allow you or allow your CEO to create rules that essentially apply across the board, right? So let's say some engineering team, right, that they have 3 or 4 different accounts in AWS, apply a backup policy, but it's one that doesn't adhere to what the CIO, right, has said. I need all of my production backups to have at least 8 months of retention. Well, Eon can say, that's great, these are being backed up, but we can actually trigger a notification and an alert that can go into, for example, a tool like ServiceNow and open a ticket, right? That notifies that team member that they have to adjust their backup policy, or else they'll keep getting notified. So having that type of governance layer, we enable our customers to exactly, I think, like you've been describing, right? It's possible to achieve this configuration, but in order to make sure that you're doing it at scale and give the team members who are actually responsible for configuring, the backup policies and setting what our retention requirements are, give them the tools they need to make sure that those are being enforced.